When you go to Western countries, it's terrible.
It's the way of El Salvador approached Bitcoin, a role model.
I think we're gonna speed up the timeline of Bitcoin adoption thanks to that. Live your life somewhere else and just get on a plane with all your Bitcoin and nobody can stop you.
How do we get the world to adopt Bitcoin?
This is when it makes sense to get on a Bitcoin standard and earn in Bitcoin as well.
You were leaving from France, you were going to El Salvador, you moved a lot around, you experienced a lot in your life already. What does self-sovereignty mean to you? What does it mean to be self-sovereign?
That's a great question. So self-sovereignty for me would be freedom of choice, freedom of speech, and freedom of movement. And this is why I think Bitcoin is so important, right? Is that you can leave your country and just go travel or just live your life somewhere else and just get on a plane with all your Bitcoin if you choose to do so, and nobody can technically stop you, right? You can see the signs like when you arrive in the United States, for example, you can see like $10,000 if you have more than that in cash, or you have to declare everything and anything that you have. And a week ago, I did something a bit stupid, but that worked. I got on the plane and I passed the security, the TSA, with like 2 Bitcoin metal backups and much more. And even that worked. I mean, they were empty, so it was for testing. But yeah, self-sovereignty, I guess it's being able to do things that you feel you need to do and that nobody can stop you from doing them.
That's amazing. And you also like left France, right? You were born in France. At some point you left France. Why did you do that?
So I left in early 2022. So I got really black-pilled by the COVID and not really the COVID, but everything else, but the disease, right? Like the response from the governments and the response to the government's actions from the citizens, friends, family, and being cast out of society for not accepting the mainstream narrative, and then the vaccine and everything. And so I got in a very, very dark place. And then I said, fuck it, I'm gone. And I left to go travel, bought a car, travel in France for 3-4 months. And then I said, okay, I went around France. That was cool. I went to Belgium. I went to Spain. Now I need to take a bigger step. And so I sold the car and I packed a 5-kilo backpack and I went to Mexico for 6 months. And that's how it started.
Oh, Mexico. It's fascinating how everybody is choosing Mexico. I interviewed Luke Mikic also, and he also went to Mexico first. Maybe that's like why is like, I think his reason from Luke Mikic was Mexico. It was his only choice. Like he was also after COVID in Australia, and with his medical status, Mexico was literally the only country that was accepting him.
Right.
Was this also the case, or did you have some specific reason why Mexico?
Yeah, it was the same. So I think I could have gone to El Salvador directly, but I had never gone traveling alone for 6 months, and I was a bit afraid of, and it will sound weird, but not having enough places to go travel to and having to come back home too soon. And so between El Salvador and Mexico, I said, well, for 6 months, I'd rather go to Mexico and be able to roam the whole country, right? So I chose Mexico, and in the end, I continued traveling to Guatemala, and I crossed the border to El Salvador, and here I am.
Did you go to El Salvador then because of Bitcoin, or why?
Yeah, so in Mexico, I met this girl, Sam, who's my girlfriend now. And so we traveled together. And at some point we said, let's cross the border and go to Guatemala. So we went there. We traveled for a month. And at this point, I had my return flight like in a week or something. And I said, well, I might not take it. And so I didn't take it, and we decided to continue and travel to El Salvador, like just going south. And yeah, I guess I really wanted to see what the country and the legal tender law was all about. At first, when I was still in France, I was not that excited by the legal tender law. I thought it was something that was very top down, and that's not the way I see things. And then I went and I checked for myself, and I found that the legal tender law doesn't impose anything on people. You don't see people being prosecuted for not accepting Bitcoin. That's not happening. So it's just giving like a legal framework for it to be usable, let's say. And so, yeah, I arrived in El Salvador, and I was very, very pleasantly surprised by that. And this is when I discovered that there was a project called Mi Primer Bitcoin that was doing Bitcoin education, not top down. Like it was the countermeasure to the top down legal tender law. It was like grassroots Bitcoin education for the masses in El Salvador. And so I got really interested. I met with the team multiple times. I went on several graduations and did some back and forth, going back to Mexico and El Salvador. And at some point, I got called back by John, the founder, and he offered me the opportunity to go back to an island on which there had been a graduation. And he offered me the opportunity to go there for 6 months and kickstart Bitcoin circular economy with social projects and education and everything. And I went. We stayed there for 6 months with Sam, and it was an incredible experience, like life-changing kind of experience in terms of, just living new experiences every day.
This is amazing. And where was this place again? Where you like? This was El Salvador already, or what?
Yeah. So it's an island called La Piraya.
La Piraya.
It's an island, but it's actually located in a mangrove. So if you look at the map, it's not like far away from the shore. It's kind of connected, but it's like mangrove. So it's pure seawater with trees. So it's completely isolated. You can only go there by boat.
Okay, and now with your view on, you have France, you have Mexico, you have El Salvador, is the way it's going now in El Salvador, is the way also El Salvador approached Bitcoin a role model, or differently ask, what should other nation states that also want to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender maybe do differently? Do you see any improvements on the process to getting to this legal tender status?
So that's a great question. I don't think the legal tender law is something that is necessary. Like it's something that El Salvador did as sending a message, right? Like we're accepting Bitcoin officially, legally. Like it was a political statement. I'm sure there's going to be Bitcoin adoption everywhere in the world without legal tender laws, and that's the point, right? We don't need the approval. We don't need the stamp from politicians. But yeah, I think it was maybe the right way to do it. But more than that, I think like the whole world is a laboratory for Bitcoin adoption. And so it's like a Petri box. We need all kinds of stuff in there and see what's the best recipe for Bitcoin adoption. And probably the recipe will differ depending on the region, the culture, the political system, and everything, like every kind of variable that you can think of. But yeah, I think El Salvador did right to do it this way. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Like writing a law is the easy part, right?
Yeah, and it's so fascinating because I think in the whole game theory, when we think about how Bitcoin will play out, the early adopters will obviously benefit more than the late majority to Bitcoin, obviously. But still, like I always would like to note that even the last person, even the last nation adopting a Bitcoin standard will still benefit from a sound money standard. But in a game theoretical sphere where you have, let's take European Union with France, Germany, Austria. Like, you come from France, I'm still based in Austria, and then you have El Salvador. Like 5 years ago, it was pretty clear where people want to live. More France, more Austria, less El Salvador. Nowadays, the murder rate was going down. There's more and more entrepreneurship, startup spirit, I think, in El Salvador. Like, this changes a little bit the weight of the countries and where people want to live. How do you see this whole game theory playing out, especially when you look back at your home country, France? Like, what has France to do to get you back? And it's like, how do you see this whole theory playing out?
That's a great question. So to answer the latter part of your question, so France has food, which is amazing. Food, red wine, cheese, everything. And I just come back from France. Actually, I spent a month there after 2 years, and it was great as a tourist, right? But you can feel in the air that people are like, prices are going up, wages are not, everyone's struggling. There's this weird vibe where it's like it can only go down from there. Like, we had our peak, and now it's just downhill. Whereas in El Salvador, there's a lot missing. Like, there's a lot to be done, but you can feel it that people are more optimistic every week, every month. There are new things happening, and especially here in Berlin, where I live, there's this Bitcoin community called Bitcoin Berlin, and it's wonderful to see people from all around the world come to this little mountain town and start building things together and start exchanging ideas and enthusiasm. And it's just beautiful. And you don't have that in France. Like, you have Bitcoin meetups, but then again, there's not this energy, this positive energy that pushes people collectively to do great things. And this is what I see in El Salvador. And talking about game theory and what people have to win or to lose, or what's the stake. I think the legal tender law again was a bold move, just like everything else that happened in the country in the last years. But they had literally nothing to lose. So it was an asymmetrical bet, as we call it, right? And so we're witnessing it right now, that it's only positive things are coming from this, and more positive things will be coming in the future. You only have to think about the amount of Bitcoin that the government holds. Again, we know that the government can go evil, right? So it's not something that we should cheer blindly. But if you just think about it, like, the more the government saves in Bitcoin, the more purchasing power it will have for its people, ideally. And so that's crazy. Like, Western countries have to print money and debasing their currency and everything just to continue financing themselves. And you have the government of El Salvador that sees its purchasing power, its potential budget go up over time. And that's just crazy to think about. Like, they're going to have so much monetary power to improve the country in the coming years. It's going to be crazy. Like, the growth will be something to see, and I'm sure it's going to bring its lot of challenges as well, right? But yeah, I'm very excited about that.
It's amazing. And you, I mean, I think I heard Max and Stacy say something like getting in El Salvador now is like getting in Bitcoin in 2011, which is a crazy thing
Yeah.
to think about.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I think I would rather have entered Bitcoin in 2011. But yeah, I understand. Maybe in terms of land, I know that land is gonna go up as well. Like its price is gonna go up. Maybe not as
Yeah,
much as Bitcoin, but
I think land in El Salvador was one of the few assets the last 2-3 years that actually outperformed Bitcoin.
okay.
Which I heard. I don't know. I've never been to El Salvador. I've never researched the topic, but I heard it from like 2-3 sources now. And Luke Mikic, I just because I made a podcast with him. He also mentioned that he saw El Salvador really rising in real estate value. He expects similar things happening in Argentina and stuff like
Yeah,
that. But I'm not like I'm Bitcoin. I don't want to get involved with real estate investment. I think real estate investment
yeah,
is a very, very risky thing at the moment.
yeah,
No matter where you are, also in El Salvador, I think it's better to
yeah,
have Bitcoin and just rent for my personal view. Yeah.
yeah.
And
And I
you also
agree
mentioned,
entirely.
yeah, you also mentioned, which is also really interesting, that every price is going up, and also obviously in Austria it's no different. I think it's even worse than in France, in Austria. Um, how is this in El Salvador right now? Because probably most of the things are still written in dollars as a unit of account, but some probably in satoshis or in Bitcoin. Uh, do you have this in this feeling, or did you have this experience in some restaurant where the satoshis are getting less every week? You have to pay this. You have to pay less satoshis for a wrap or something like that. You had some experience like that.
Well, yeah. Your purchasing power goes up over time with Bitcoin. So especially in the last months, of course, life gets cheaper. Even more so when you're living on a Bitcoin standard, which is what I'm doing. I work for Mi Primer Bitcoin now, and I'm getting paid in Bitcoin. So when Bitcoin goes up, purchasing power goes up as well.
That's amazing. Yeah, I did not manage to get paid in Bitcoin entirely, but I'm working on it.
Nice, nice.
It's hard in Austria.
Yeah, I understand. And yeah,
For you, maybe interesting. Did you get in Bitcoin before you got in El Salvador? Just
oh
or
yeah,
did you get bit? Okay.
yeah. So I got into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and whatever in 2017. Actually, I got
Oh,
into Bitcoin like Bitcoin only in 2016. I was trying to buy weed online, and I don't know what happened in the process. I opened the Electrum wallet and I froze, and I just couldn't understand what was happening. And in the end, I got scammed. It was 50 euros, but whatever. And so that was my first experience with Bitcoin. And then I heard about it again in 2017. And this is when I started dabbling in shit coins and whatever, losing a shit ton of money. And then started learning about Bitcoin and money and why we need Bitcoin to thrive as a civilization.
did your view on Bitcoin change when you were in El Salvador?
Yeah, a little bit. So before that, I was completely anonymous. I didn't go to meetups. I was very high on privacy, and that was a priority for me. And after going to El Salvador and starting this project on the island, and even before that, I created a website to do coaching and everything. And I decided to go public, let's say, and create like a public Twitter account. And so before that, I saw Bitcoin as something that was really good for the future, but I couldn't see, like, I didn't have the use of it, like the daily use of it. And so then I arrived in El Salvador, and this is when I started paying for things in Bitcoin, and you get addicted to that. Like it's a really nice feeling. So this is when I shifted a little bit from this like future oriented Bitcoin as savings that needs to be private, and because you don't want them to be seized and everything, to something that is more like still the same thing, but also like you can spend it and it's fine. So yeah.
That's amazing. I think I interview a lot of different people. Like I have people on from India, I have people on from Australia, obviously from Austria and Germany, also from America, a lot of from El Salvador. I think I actually had more from El Salvador than from Austria on, which is crazy to think about. And I see so many different views on Bitcoin. For example,
Right.
when I asked the question, what's the main hurdle in their country about Bitcoin, and in El Salvador, I got the answer a lot that people think that Bitcoin is from the government.
Right. That's
You
true.
will never hear that in Austria. Here, it's something completely against the government.
Yeah.
So this is different views on what Bitcoin is actually doing. Do you think it's because in El Salvador Bitcoin is spent and Bitcoin is like in the circular economy? Do you think it's important for Bitcoin to be spent for circular economy to really go and for the thriving adoption?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like if we hadn't spent Bitcoin ever, the coins would have stayed with the miners, right? So that wouldn't have worked. So of course we need to spend them, to exchange them. What you want is like, it's just money. You want to earn it more than you spend it, right? And for some people, Bitcoin can be only an investment, or only like pure savings, and just stacking Bitcoin and never selling. And you see the memes on Twitter, and that's great. If you're living in a Western country, or if you don't need it in your daily life, right? But then if you want to use it as your daily currency, as your daily money, that changes. You have to spend it, and this is when it makes sense to get on a Bitcoin standard and earn in Bitcoin as well. And I think that's when you're approaching freedom, right, and self-sovereignty. That's when you can say that you don't need fiat anymore, which is slightly not true for me, because I still need to spend some fiat at times. But then again, it's just like a spectrum, and it's a direction, right? So the goal is to, get away from the old system, the legacy system, and go towards the new one.
That's very true. And you're doing also work with My First Bitcoin and with. Do you also do work with Bitcoin Beach? Are you also involved in that?
So the first project on the island, La Pirraya, was a project that was a collaboration between Mi Primer Bitcoin and Bitcoin Beach. So Bitcoin Beach was funding the project, and Mi Primer Bitcoin was in charge of the operations. So they sent me on the island, and I used the budget to fund social projects, and we did an event. We renovated a communal house, gave workshops there. We gave Bitcoin classes, English classes, Spanish classes, Bitcoin workshops for entrepreneurs, workshops for people that wanted to learn new skills to become entrepreneurs and sell their skills to the tourists. And after that, we organized a beach soccer tournament with a whole festival with music and everything. I don't know how we pulled this off. I had never done that before, so
Very cool.
it was really, really funny. And after that, we built a road, an asphalt road. Like it was crazy. And after that, the last project was the creation of a seawall, 50 meters seawall, because the seawater comes in when the tide is really, really high in July, August, something like this. It goes above it's a dirt seawall that they have, and so we created a new seawall out of from scratch. And so this is that was La Piraya. And after that, Mi Primer Bitcoin offered me to continue with Mi Primer Bitcoin. So I'm now in charge of the international relations. And so what we're doing exactly is we give classes in El Salvador, right? We give Bitcoin classes to Salvadoran students, but then we also have like open source materials to teach them, and these materials were shared to the whole world and the Bitcoin communities all around the globe. And so after a while, they came back to us, gave us feedback, and we started communicating, right? Exchanging best practices and tips. And so we thought we should do a community of communities. We should build a network of Bitcoin communities that teach the Bitcoin diploma and that provide this independent, impartial, open source education to their peers. And this is where I came in. They asked me to be in charge of the international expansion and building this node network where the Bitcoin communities all around the world are the nodes in the network. And so we strive to make it as decentralized as possible, as self-governing as possible. And this is what we're constantly working on to of course, it's not going to be decentralized as Bitcoin because the Bitcoin nodes are computers that run objective, replicable computer code. So it's easy to verify. It's easy to be. I mean, it's easier to be in consensus with the right software, the Bitcoin software, right? In the case of humans and communities and human organization, it's slightly different. So we need to architect the network in a way that it's self-governing, which is a great challenge. It's very interesting. And so all these communities get together every month, and we have this general assembly where each community presents what they've been working on, their achievements, what they need help with, and this is fantastic to see. You should see the level of the interactions. It's pure signal, and the cooperation, the collaboration between these people, these communities that all align on the same values and that focus on teaching their peers about Bitcoin is just fantastic to see.
Amazing. What do you have some learnings from the interaction of the different communities, like something that came up from some other community that the communities then adopted? How does the open source program look like the learning material?
So yeah, we have our GitHub with the Bitcoin diploma, our resources, the translations repositories, and then we have the Node Network repository with a directory for the node network. And so each Bitcoin community that is part of the node network can create their own entry where they present their team, who they are, what they focus on, achievements, like all these informations that can be very interesting to people and also to, well, funding sources, right? And so in these directories, they also have the possibility to upload their own contents. And so what we saw is that we have certain nodes that created slides for online classes for the Bitcoin Diploma workbook. Others have created activities. And so they upload that, and not only the node network can benefit from it, but the whole world can benefit from it because it's open source. And so it's like this self-reinforcing mechanism where the node network grows because each community grows because the node network grows. And so it's beautiful to see. It's only starting to get traction, but the growth that we're going to see in the future is going to be tremendous. And I think we're going to speed up the timeline of Bitcoin adoption thanks to that.
21 Bitcoin is Bitcoin only from day one, and they teach and preach self-custody. This is my go-to exchange when someone asks me, oh, where can I buy my Bitcoin from? This is the easiest entry for Bitcoiners. And if you want lower fees, plus at the same time support this podcast, use code Robin and click the link in the description. That's amazing. I love when people come together and try to figure out how we can drive Bitcoin adoption a little bit further ahead. Right. This is amazing. We have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest, and this question gets a little bit in that direction. But I don't want to get the question now in front, so we will keep it for the end of the podcast. For people now that, like, for example, for me, I cannot really spend my Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Like in Austria, there are not a lot of places that accept Bitcoin, and even when they accept it, I have to pay capital gains tax on the spent Bitcoin. It's a whole hurdle. So I'm just like having my fiat stack and spending my fiat, and everything that I don't need operational, I have in Bitcoin. So I use Bitcoin as my store of value, basically, and then I'm kind of all in Bitcoin. Just a small operational money I have in fiat. What's your like Bitcoin setup look like? You also mentioned that you have a little bit fiat left, and you spend it. I think you spend more Bitcoin on a regular, maybe even daily basis. You probably also receive money in Bitcoin. So how is your setup? Do you have Lightning? Which apps do you use? I think for people, especially not from El Salvador, not from places where they can spend Bitcoin, they're really curious how Bitcoin on an individual level, the setup can look like. Do you probably have like some savings account where it's good secured, and then also a pay wallet or something like that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So first of all, I think that your setup is great. I mean, if you can spend Bitcoin, you just stack it, and that's fine. And maybe at some point, you'll want or you'll have to leave your country, and maybe Bitcoin at this point will become something that is going to be very necessary. And I don't know if you see this book, The Sovereign Individual. Have you read it?
Yes, it's a great book.
So they're basically talking about Bitcoin, right? Like in the book, there is this electronic cash money that will allow sovereign individuals to become completely free of political control, and that will be able to go travel the world and just go where they're treated best. So maybe at some point that's going to be your case as well. But yeah, in terms of my setup, I detail that on my Twitter account, and this is something I'm constantly working on. And I've gone back to rethinking about it in the last months, let's say. But yeah, I mostly use. So if you want the whole detail, because I'm not really shy about that anymore. So for now, at Mi Primer Bitcoin, we are paid with Lightning URLs. So I mostly use Phoenix for my day-to-day, but they don't have the LN URLs, or maybe I just haven't found them, which is possible. So I use Wallet of Satoshi for that. And then I transfer everything to Phoenix, and what's above a certain threshold in Phoenix, I just transfer it to a cold storage. And so I use Foundation Passport for single sig cold storage. And right now I just implemented a family vault. That's what I call multi-sig, distributed multi-sig among not heirs, but guardians and heirs. And this is something I've been working on in the past months. And so it's a 3 of 5 with a passphrase on top of each seed. It's the same passphrase. And so the guardians have the seeds, but they can't collude between themselves. And if they get robbed, it's not such a big deal, because they don't have the passphrase, and the heirs have the passphrase, have each a copy of the passphrase. And so they have this active part that they can take with them wherever they live or they go travel or whatever. And the guardians are individuals that have more stable locations, right? Like a house that they own or something like this. And they have more of a passive role in the setup. And after that comes, well, instructions, recovery instructions for the heirs, for the guardians. And I've been working on this for the past month or so. And this is something I'm very proud of because I had never done that before in such a level of detail. And right now I'm building an online course so that people can replicate exactly that with their own specific situation, right? Who's my heirs? Who are my guardians? Questions like this. And it's going to be a lot of work. I'm only getting started, but I think that's something that's going to be very, very helpful for a lot of people, especially for people that travel and that want to make sure that they don't have to travel with their money, but at the same time they don't have to leave their money at home unguarded, right? So I think that's going to be very, very interesting for people that aspire to become sovereign individuals.
Amazing. I think you said you're just now getting started with. Maybe we can, like, once you have like a nice setup and you have like everything laid out, maybe we can have you back on in like 2, 3, 4 months, and then you can really walk us through the whole process and how people can adopt it, like basically a Bitcoin setup for nomads that want to like move around a lot, travel a lot. Because if you have just a home base, then you don't have a lot of the challenges that you have as when you travel a lot. Because if you don't want to be in a plane and have all your Bitcoin with you.
Yeah, that's not a great feeling. Yeah, so the setup I actually have, I could detail it if you'd like. What I don't have yet is the whole online course with videos and PDFs and everything that is required to make it a simple process to follow for less technical individuals. I mean, even for me, and I'm not that technical, but I'm kind of a Bitcoin nerd, which is not the case for many people, even Bitcoiners, right? Some of us like Bitcoin, but they don't like the technical stuff.
Yeah.
And so, I don't have the material for them yet, but I could technically walk you through the process. It's pretty simple, actually.
Really, really cool. Yeah. Then I will just, once you have it available, just link to your sites, because this video also needs a little time till it gets out. Maybe it's in the same time, and then people can check it out, in the links down below and can check out your sites and what you are doing directly. This
definitely
will be perfect. Yeah. Let's change topics a little bit. I often think about the question, because there's a saying, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then they join you. And I always think of which phase are we in? Because they definitely don't ignore us, because everybody's talking about Bitcoin. I think we are above that they laugh at us, because we are now having a Bitcoin ETF in America. We have legal tender status. We have a lot of publicly traded companies in Bitcoin. We have really grassroots movement around the world. We have so many things going for Bitcoin. So I don't think we can say we're in a they love us state. I'm confused between they fight us between and they join us. And the question I really wanted to ask you now is, how do we know when we won? Like, when do we consider a win for sound money? What has to happen for Bitcoin, for sound money, for our financial system, that we are saying yes, sound money, hard money has now actually won, and we are not in this Keynesian economics BS anymore?
Right. That's a great question. So, in my opinion, we are only starting to go from they laugh at you to then they fight you. I think the ETF is. I could even go so far as to say it's still part of the they laugh at you, because they're like, yeah, I mean, it's a speculative asset, and they're gonna speculate on it. Like yeah, it's kind of a, well, okay, we realize like one property of Bitcoin because people want the product. We create the product for them, and we make money off of it, which is okay. I mean, it's a free market, I guess. But then when you see what's happening in Europe, for example, with unhosted wallets, and that they're gonna make it illegal, or I don't follow the news that much, but I've seen that there are things happening around that, right? And I think this is when the then they fight you phase begins, because maybe that's the pessimistic side of me that is talking, but we are taking the only way, the only mechanism governments have to survive, and we're taking it away from them, and we're saying we're not supporting you anymore. You're gonna not probably die, but you're gonna shrink a lot, and we're gonna do our own thing without you. That's basically what we're saying with Bitcoin, right? It's money that is independent from the government. And so if they don't have that anymore, if people do not use their currencies, their fiat currencies, by decree that were imposed on us, if we don't use them anymore, they won't be happy. And I believe they haven't even started yet to fight us. Like, they're still laughing at us. It's like they're only starting to realize that we might be onto something. And this is why they're going to try and maybe not ban Bitcoin outright, but they're going to try and capture it, like unhosted wallets. What is an unhosted wallet? It doesn't mean anything. And they don't know anything about Bitcoin. The only thing that they know is that they want to capture it. And so they're going to try every possible way to capture it. And at some point, maybe they're going to even try and scare people by doing like mass arrests or whatever. Like, they can do 6102, KYC, reach out to some people and say you have undeclared Bitcoin under your floorboards, right? So that can happen. And I think that in many countries that will happen. And so again, this is why I went like as far as to leave my country and go 10,000 kilometers away, live in a country that is pro Bitcoin. So yeah, and to answer the latter part of the question, when do we know we won? I think that's something we're going to be able to say maybe 100 years from now, when we're really sure that we won, or maybe even more than that. We don't know. I mean, I don't know the future, and who knows what can happen. Maybe Bitcoin is a Trojan horse, and they fight us for a little while, and then they realize it's not worth it, and so they join us, and everything's great. Or they fight us for 100 years, and it's going to be terrible. And then after the fire stops, the phoenix rises from the ashes. Who knows? There are a lot of possible scenarios, and I don't really know what will happen. So I'm just focusing on living life and making sure that today, in the present, I can help people get on to Bitcoin.
That's an amazing thing, like, because I also want to, because actually of this reason want to document the whole thing on my podcast. Have as many possible guests on my show as humanly I can do.
I've
I'm
seen
doing,
that.
I am doing 300 this year, probably even like 320, 330, something around that. And this will be extremely cool to see in like 10, 20 years when you look back at those podcast episodes and see what people thought about the future and how it actually turned out. And brings me also to my next question. What do you think when we come to the stage where we have one and when we are over the hill, where we are on this sound money level, maybe in 50 years, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 150 years, whenever it is, what would how different is this world looking like, and what can you already see in El Salvador in as a small window to this world in 150 years?
So that's a great question. I think one can only imagine and visualize what may happen, right? And we could talk about lower time preference. We could talk about um, distribution of capital and the opposite of misallocation, and we could talk about more freedom, more individual freedom, more self-sovereignty and everything. But as a big picture, I have absolutely no idea. Maybe the world is going to fracture before that, and so we're going to see like oasis of self-sovereignty among a world full of tyranny. Who knows? Who knows? But yeah, we're gonna see some big changes, and I think we're already seeing that. Like when you go to Western countries, it's terrible. Like you see the beautiful architecture, you see all this legacy of the past, and then you see what's happening today, and it's like, oh, that's not pretty, right? And so that only tells you where it's going for now. And then you go to other places like El Salvador, and it's like, yeah, we come from a pretty bad place. Like a few years ago, people were dying in the streets, and that was terrible. And before that, it was a civil war, and I mean, the recent history of El Salvador is terrible. But now you see that people start earning more money, and they see that infrastructure is getting better, and so they want to work towards improving their lives. And this is a much better feeling and much better atmosphere to live in.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think it's when we look at the future, what money can do, and it's so fundamental because people say, yeah, it's just money. People have to still like do all the stuff, and this is right. Like I always make this comparison between you're running in the sand with a lot of water, and it's beautiful to run in the sand, of course. But when you're just focusing on the running part, when you run on the sand with like maybe knee deep water, you can barely run. Like you fall down, you have a really hard time running. And when you compare that to a solid street where you can run nicely, in both cases you still have to run yourself because Bitcoin is still just money. But once you get running, you get a lot more for your energy that you put in on a Bitcoin standard than on a fiat standard. So I think this is like kind of the thing that we can just imagine what could happen. Like what will happen on a society level when nobody is being taken advantage of by a central authority. What can happen when everybody can accumulate money, when nobody has any limits to it, and there is no waterhead above us that takes everything in and tries to like say, you do this, you do this, you do this. Like it's a massive change in the future, I guess, and it will be really interesting to see how this all phases out. But yeah, nobody knows how this will turn out. That's why I'm asking it so often, because when we have a lot of different opinions on the same matter, we might get a view on what might happen directionally, not exactly just directionally. Yeah.
There is a great video conference that was given by Georg Guido Ulsmann, the Austrian economist, that took place. I don't remember the year, but it was some years ago, and it's predicting what's happening today, and it was called the cultural consequences of fiat money, and it's mind blowing. Like he talks about everything that's happening, and if you pair that with the book When Money Dies from Adam Ferguson, it just combines perfectly. Like you see the direction things are taking in the short term, let's say, and that, at least for me, that helps me imagine where we can go from there once we touch the bottom, right? We can only go up, and we can only grow again.
That's it's very true. I like what you're saying, and I think Bitcoiners are really curious people all the time, and that's why before the end of the podcast, I like to ask, what are you currently learning about? Like, what's your passion right now? What you're looking into? It doesn't have to be about Bitcoin. If it's about Bitcoin, it's okay. But if it's not about Bitcoin, like, what are you currently spending the most of your time learning about?
So right now, well, about Bitcoin, it's mostly multi-sig, along with covenants and stuff like that I have a hard time like understanding. But other than Bitcoin, in the last months, I did some carpentry. So I built the shelves that you can see behind me. I built some furniture for my new house. I'm renting, right? But that's my new home, and it was empty, so I had to build some stuff because I didn't want to buy the cheap, shitty furniture from the store. So I just made my own, and yeah, that was mostly it for the past months. And right now I'm building this website. So I have to learn a whole lot of things about online marketing and email and all these things that I'm not that good at, because I just want to provide value to people, and you have to ship that value to people, and you have to find ways to connect with people. So I need to learn more about that.
Yeah, that's I mean, this is kind of also what I'm learning with the podcast. I'm trying to figure out, okay, how can I package my videos so good that it's even reaching non-Bitcoiners? Because Bitcoiners will find my videos eventually. I have enough Bitcoiners on, and I have really interesting videos. Bitcoiners will talk to each other and say, hey, check out Robin, he has really good interviews. But I think I really wanna have such great, good titles, thumbnails, everything. The packaging has to be so great that it reaches the no coiner level. Because if I'm just an echo chamber for Bitcoiners, right, it's still great because it's something that when some new Bitcoiners are coming in, they can check out my Bitcoin and podcasting can go in. But I want to package it so good that no coiners are like, oh, what's going on there with Bitcoin and in Salvador? What's that? So that's kind of why I'm so bullish on how to market and how to package stuff, because it's important that we Bitcoiners are marketing and packaging stuff really good, because sound money is important. And the more we can get into that sphere, the smoother the transition to Bitcoin to sound money will be. The transition will come anyways. The question is, will it be smooth or will it be really hard, and will it be painful? Right. I hope for a smooth transition, and that's why we have to educate people. For the end routine, as I teased before, we have an end routine where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest, and it's a big question, but maybe an interesting one because you are actually working in that field. How do we get the world to adopt Bitcoin?
That's a great question. So I believe, and we believe at Mi Primer Bitcoin, that open source Bitcoin education is the answer. Open source Bitcoin education that is independent, impartial, and delivered in a decentralized, grassroots, unstoppable way. And this is what we're building, right? We're teaching in El Salvador, but we're also building this unstoppable library, like living library, that just ships all around the globe at all times, and that learns from itself. And to us, that's the answer: education, education, education.
Really, really cool. Thank you, Quentin, for being on. Thank you for speaking to us today. It was a pleasure having you. It was a pleasure hearing what you were thinking of El Salvador, Bitcoin, and the world, how it collapses or evolves in front of us, however you want to see it. When people want to ask you questions and get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So I have a Twitter account. It's Quentin BTCB. I have to check it. I don't fully remember it, but yeah, it's Quentin BTCB. I'm working on the website, but again, I had made a beautiful website, but nobody came to the website, so I just tore it down, and I'm building a new one. So it's under construction, and yeah, so better to reach me through Twitter.
Perfect. Then thank you for being on.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for receiving me, and see you soon.